Hi everyone, Brian Kroc here. Welcome back to Hey Man, How Do You Do That? The show dedicated to diving under the hood of our music software to expand our composition toolkit. First of all, I want to say a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters. These videos wouldn't be possible without you. If you'd like to get involved in supporting this channel and also supporting my big band, Big Heart Machine, please check out my Patreon page via the link in the description below. So if you've been watching my videos or listening to any of my music, you're probably aware by now that I'm primarily interested as a composer in finding new ways to be expressive in music. Don't get me wrong, I love all kinds of music, and I don't expect myself or anyone else to be constantly reinventing the wheel. It just makes me excited to dream up new ideas and then figure out how to achieve them. The goal isn't newness in and of itself. In fact, I can probably rest assured that I've never had an actually new idea in my entire life. It's more this. I like getting in the headspace of going out on a limb, of trying something new. That gets me motivated to compose. On my channel, my goal is to show you some of my experiments and experiments by other composers that I love, in the hopes that this will encourage you to try the same experiments or to dream up experiments that are all your own. So far, all of these videos have been primarily dedicated to exploring ways of abstracting the pulse in music. A lot of my favorite drummers throughout history have had time feels that are elastic and almost mystical, and yet today we live in a world where everything is quantized. If you don't know, quantization means that every individual note is moved so that it fits perfectly on a grid. You can think about quantization is to rhythm as auto-tune is to pitch. Now, this is a very old discussion at this point. Quantization has been around for decades and decades, and before digital recording, people were doing it by splicing up tape. It's nothing new. But in my opinion, it's so easy today that we live in a world that is just filled with a profusion of music that is as polished and pristine as it is insipid and lifeless. So this is why I'm kind of obsessed with trying to push the limits of rhythmic notation in my own music. Check out my older videos on irrational time signatures and polytempo for a couple more examples. In this video, I'm going to show you yet another possible experiment for breaking out of a rhythmic box. So I recently released a new music video with my big band, Big Heart Machine, called Unblock the Stoppage. And in that composition, I achieved a pretty interesting rhythmic effect that I'm really proud of. If you look at my sketches from 2018, you'll see that I was dreaming of creating a section of music that was speeding up at the same time as it was slowing down. I don't think I've ever heard this before, and I didn't know if it was even possible or what it would sound like, but it was just an idea. But I think I came pretty close. Check it out. So to create this sound, I basically combined two different types of tempo alterations. Don't worry, if there are terms you don't recognize, I'm going to explain them momentarily, so stick with me. Using rhythmic diminution, I composed a written accelerando for the horns of Big Heart Machine to play. At the same time, I instructed the conductor to lead the band in a very gradual ritardando. Okay, so let's wrap our brains around this idea. There are a multitude of ways to change speed within a piece of music, and I think of them in two broad categories. Discrete changes, where the change of speed happens noticeably and immediately, and gradual changes, where the change of speed happens incrementally. Yum, coffee. You can have both discrete and gradual changes of speed at the micro level, as in the level of individual instruments playing individual notes. This is where the terms diminution and augmentation come into play. Diminution is the subdivision of notes into smaller units. We most often see even subdivisions of notes. For example, a melody in half notes can later be presented as the same melody but in quarter notes or eighth notes. So I remember this terminology being kind of confusing when I was in school, because diminution always results in faster music, when you would think diminishing might mean that it's slowing down. But no, you're diminishing the value of the individual notes, which makes the music that you hear sound faster. Augmentation is the opposite. A melody presented initially as quarter notes could then be presented later on as half notes or whole notes. Augmentation always results in slower music. By the way, if you want to hear a really cool example of a piece of music that uses rhythmic augmentation and diminution in ingenious and really groovy ways, you could check out Vijay Iyer's piece Accelerando. I can't decide if I want to say accelerando or accelerando. It's an Italian term, so technically it should be accelerando, but I'm not Italian, so it feels a little douchey and pretentious for me to say it. I'm going to stick with accelerando, though, because I started there. Diminution and augmentation can be more subtle than just even subdivisions or even multiplications. For example, Benjamin Britten's A Ceremony of Carols has this great section in the harp. Each successive beat is faster than the next. But in this case, one beat is divided in 4, the next beat is divided in 5, the next beat is divided in 6, the next beat is divided in 7. This is something that you could call a written accelerando. If rhythmic diminution and augmentation are discrete changes in speed, how do we make a gradual change of speed at the micro level? Well, for this we use a kind of notation called feathered beams. Feathered beams let a performer know to make each successive note come a little bit sooner than the note preceding it. Let's see if I can sing an example of this. So it'd be like da 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 da. That's the basic idea. And this type of notation will necessarily be a little bit less accurate than augmentation and diminution, because every performer is going to interpret this notation a little bit differently. Now, if we zoom out from the level of individual pitches to the level of an entire ensemble or section of music, we can also change speed discretely or gradually. The discrete way to change speed on this macro level is via a technique called metric modulation. Metric modulation was a term coined by Richard Franco Goldman in 1951 to describe the music of Elliott Carter, who used this technique all the time. It's sort of like a defining characteristic of his approach to form. Basically, metric modulation involves shifting from one tempo to another directly related tempo, usually involving a pivot right before the new tempo, using a subdivision that's related. So here's a simple example. If I'm in 4/4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, triplet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. In that case, the eighth note triplet gets the pulse of in the new section. It can be more complicated. For example, let's try 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in that case, the quarter note quintuplet becomes the new quarter note in our new tempo. And this is more akin to something you'd probably see in an Elliott Carter score. The saxophone solo in my tune Steep Ravine, which I think there's going to be a card conveniently allowing you to go listen to it. That saxophone solo uses metric modulation as a key component in slowing down the tempo to a grinding halt that concludes that movement in a larger suite of music. The segment begins at quarter note equals 89, but in measure 165, the quarter note triplet subdivision is prominently heard, and in measure 166, the quarter note triplet becomes the new quarter note, now at 70 beats per minute. So if you want to check out a really fun and cool example of metric modulation in the context of a jazz big band score, it actually might be the first time that I ever saw metric modulation in any score before. Check out The Life of Riley by Jim McNeely and the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra. Okay, so that covers the discrete way of changing tempo on the macro level. What's the gradual way? Well, that involves something called rubato. Now, rubato is a term that can mean multiple different things. Many instrumentalists who play classical music think about rubato as an expressive device. The tempo remains constant, but the performer, at his or her own discretion, can add minute inflections, slowly speeding up or slowing down. You know what? Since I'm singing examples in this video, apparently, let's see if I can do one. So, whereas if you're playing music from, the Baroque era, the 16th note might stay relatively constant. If you're playing, like, say, Liszt or something, you might interpret the 16th note with some rubato. I don't know, something like that. Okay, I'm not a specialist in this kind of music, but I'm using rubato here in today's more conventional sense, which involves gradual changes of speed for an entire ensemble. Speeding the whole ensemble up is called an accelerando, and slowing the whole ensemble down is called a retardando. Now, what if we zoom out even further once again to the, super macro level, looking at the change of tempo from track to track on an album, or from movement to movement in a symphony? Programming is important. If you have a really fast piece, you might want to contrast it with a slower movement, or you might want to contrast it with an even faster movement. Basically, if you have the listener's attention for an hour, say, how would you want to take them on a journey? This is a topic that definitely merits much more discussion, but we're going to save that for another day. Okay, so now that we've established our terminology, let's take a look at the score for Unblock the Stoppage. Remember, I wanted to write music that sounded like it was slowing down and speeding up simultaneously. I'll admit this is a very vague idea, and I had absolutely no idea how it would sound, how it would fit in the context of my piece, but I went about writing it anyways because the great thing about being a composer is if you write something that sucks, you can just discard it. So what I decided to do was have the pulse gradually slow down while the subdivisions within that pulse gradually speed up. Look at letter J in the score. You'll find a retardando instruction followed by a dotted line that lasts for like 40 measures. This is very, very uncommon. I can't think of another example of a retardando that lasts for this long. But if you can, please let me know in the comments to this video because I would love to check it out. Now, while this extremely long retardando is happening, the bari sax and bass trombone have a melody in unison that is subdivided in whole note triplets. After 8 measures, the melody is then subdivided in half notes, which are just slightly faster than whole note triplets. The subdivision changes yet again to half note quintuplets. Again, these are just a hair quicker than half notes. Next come half note triplets, then quarter notes tied to 16th notes, then quarter note quintuplets, quarter note triplets, eighth note quintuplets, eighth note triplets, and finally 16th notes. Let's listen to this now again, but this time I'm going to play the MIDI for you so that we can hear the click track as it's happening. To me, this sounded really cool and I was super excited to bring it in front of the band. A little disclaimer, I wouldn't write music like this for a group of strangers because I think they might get a little pissed off. In the same way that I was going out on a limb as a composer, this is asking the musicians to go out on a limb as a performer, and professionals don't often like to be asked to play something that could potentially make them sound like shit. Now, do you have any crazy ideas that you don't know how to notate that you'd like me to try? Let me know in the comments, I might give it a try. Anyways, thank you so much for listening. Please click like, don't smash it. I don't understand why people say smash it. Be gentle with your technology, it's expensive. So just gently click like, and gently click subscribe. That's very useful as I'm trying to grow this channel. And thank you again. Really appreciate you watching.